On November 10th, 1985, a hunter in New Hampshire was tracking deer through Bear Brook State Park when he found a 55-gallon steel drum, half hidden in the underbrush. The lid was pried open. Inside, wrapped in a blue tarp, were two bodies, a woman and a young girl. There was no identification, no witnesses, no missing persons report that matched. Police had a steel drum, a blue tarp, and two Jane Does. For years they were buried under a headstone that read, "Known only to God." But the police had missed something. There was a second barrel, hidden 100 yards away in the same stretch of woods. It would take 15 years to find it. Bear Brook State Park is a quiet stretch of forest in Allenstown, New Hampshire, about 15 miles from the state capital. In autumn, hunters go there for white-tailed deer. Nobody expected to find a crime scene. The bodies inside that first barrel were skeletonized. They had been there for years. The woman was estimated to be between 23 and 33. She had curly brown hair and extensive dental work. The girl was between 5 and 11, with wavy light brown hair and two earrings in each ear. Both had died of blunt force trauma to the head. Investigators worked the case for years. They released facial reconstructions. They checked missing persons databases across the country. They followed hundreds of tips and ruled out every single one. The bodies remained unidentified. In 1987, the woman and the girl were laid to rest in an Allenstown cemetery. The tombstone read, "Here lies the mortal remains known only to God of a woman aged 23 to 33 and a girl child aged 8 to 10. Their slain bodies were found on November 10th, 1985, in Bear Brook State Park. May their souls find peace in God's loving care." The case went cold and stayed cold for years. Then in May 2000, 15 years after the first discovery, a police team returned to the same area of the park. They searched beyond the original crime scene tape, about 100 yards from where the first barrel was found, hidden in thick undergrowth. They found another 55-gallon steel drum. Inside were the remains of two more young girls. The first barrel held a mother and her daughter. The second barrel held two more children. All four had died the same way, blunt force trauma. Police now believe the second barrel was there the whole time in 1985. They simply missed it because it was outside the initial search perimeter. 4 victims, 0 names, and a killer who had already vanished into thin air. For the next 17 years, these 4 victims were known only as the Allenstown Four. Their identities were a complete mystery, but forensic science was slowly piecing together who they were. DNA testing revealed that 3 of them were biologically related. The adult woman and the 2 oldest girls were connected through their maternal DNA. She was their mother. The 4th girl, the youngest in the second barrel, was unrelated to the other 3. Isotopic analysis of the bones suggested the 3 related victims had spent time in the western or midwestern United States. The 4th child, the one who didn't match, appeared to have grown up in the upper Midwest, possibly the Great Lakes region. All 3 girls shared one unusual feature, a gap between their front teeth. The youngest had long blonde hair and was barely 2 feet tall, just a baby. The middle child had brown hair, an overbite, and may have suffered from anemia. But science could only tell investigators so much. They still didn't know who these people were. They didn't know where they came from, and they didn't know who put them in those barrels. That answer would come from a completely different case, one that started with a missing woman named Denise Baudin. Denise Baudin was a young mother from Manchester, New Hampshire. In 1981, she was dating a man who called himself Bob Evans. Around Thanksgiving of that year, she visited her family in Goffstown and was never seen again. Her family assumed she had left town for financial reasons. They didn't report her missing, but her 6-month-old daughter, who had been with her, was gone too. Bob Evans took that baby and raised her as his own. He called her Lisa. For the next 5 years, Evans moved around the country with the child, always staying one step ahead of the law. In 1986, he abandoned Lisa at an RV park in Scotts Valley, California. He simply walked away. A stranger found her wandering the campground alone. Evans was arrested, convicted of child abandonment, and sentenced to 3 years in prison. After his release in 1990, he disappeared completely. Then in 2002, a man using the name Rae-Venter murdered his wife in California, a chemist named Yoon Jun. He beat her to death and hid her body in cat litter in their home. When police arrested him, they found multiple sets of identification. He was also Jerry Mockerman, and Gordon Jensen, and Curtis Kimball, and Bob Evans. A fingerprint check revealed that all of those names belonged to one man. But his real name was still unknown. He went to prison for the murder of Yoon Jun, and there he stayed until 2010, when he died of lung cancer at the age of 67. He took his secrets with him, but the investigation into his past was just beginning. In 2013, a detective from San Bernardino County named Peter Headley took on a cold case, the abandoned child known as Lisa. He wanted to find out who she really was. So he turned to a relatively new tool, genetic genealogy. Working with genealogist Barbara Rae-Venter, a pioneer in forensic genealogy, Headley traced Lisa's DNA through public genealogy databases. They found a match to a missing woman named Denise Boda. Lisa was her daughter, and the man who had raised her, Bob Evans, was her kidnapper. That discovery linked Bob Evans to New Hampshire, and it linked him to the Bear Brook barrels. In January 2017, New Hampshire authorities announced that Bob Evans was the prime suspect in the Bear Brook murders. DNA confirmed that he was the father of the middle child in the second barrel, the girl who didn't match the others. But Bob Evans wasn't his real name either. Police still didn't know who he actually was. In June 2017, they released a video of a police interview with Evans from his 2002 arrest, hoping someone would recognize him. A month later, they got their answer. A woman watching the news in Arizona realized the man looked familiar and told her father to call the police. That tip led to a DNA test. On August 18, 2017, authorities confirmed that Bob Evans was a man named Peder Rasmussen, a native of Denver, Colorado, who had last been seen by his own family in 1974. Rasmussen had been a ghost for more than 40 years. He had used at least 5 different aliases across multiple states. He had married multiple women, fathered multiple children, and left a trail of bodies from New Hampshire to California. The media called him the Chameleon Killer. This was the first major case in which genetic genealogy had been used to identify a suspect. The technique would later be used to catch the Golden State Killer. But identifying the killer was only half the answer. The victims still had no names. In October 2018, a librarian and web sleuth named Rebecca Heath was searching through missing persons cases when she found a post on Ancestry.com from 1999. A man was looking for his half-sister, a girl named Sarah McWaters, who had disappeared with her mother in 1978. The details matched. The mother was Marley's Honeychurch. She had a daughter named Marie Vaughan from her first marriage, and another daughter, Sarah, from her second marriage. All 3 had been last seen around Thanksgiving, 1978. The same time Marlise started dating Terry Rasmussen. Heath contacted Detective Peter Headley. DNA tests confirmed it. Marlise, Marie, and Sarah were the 3 related Bear Brook victims. On June 6, 2019, after more than 30 years, police held a press conference and finally gave them their names back. Marlise Elizabeth Honeychurch was 24 years old when she died. She had 2 daughters, Marie Elizabeth Vaughan, age 7, and Sarah Lynn McWaters, just 11 months old. They had been living in La Puente, California. In late 1978, Marlise began a relationship with Terry Rasmussen, and the 3 of them disappeared. They were never seen alive again. The 4th victim, the middle child in the second barrel, remained unidentified for 6 more years. She was Rasmussen's biological daughter, born in 1976. Her mother was a woman named Peder, who disappeared in the late 1970s and is also believed to be one of Rasmussen's victims. In September 2025, more than 4 decades after the last of the 4 victims died, the 4th victim was finally identified. Her name was Rae Rasmussen. She was between 2 and 4 years old when she died. A funeral for Marlies and Marie was held in November 2019 in Allenstown. Their headstone now bears their real names. Sarah McWaters was laid to rest in Connecticut, closer to her father's family. Terry Rasmussen died in 2010 without ever being charged for the Bear Brook murders. He never confessed. He never faced a jury for what he did to Marlies, Marie, Sarah, and Rae. But his conviction for the murder of Yoon Soon Jun in California was the thread that unraveled everything. Without that arrest, without that DNA sample, without the dogged work of Detective Peter Headley and genealogist Barbara Rae-Venter, the 4 victims might still be buried under a headstone that read, "Known only to God." Rasmussen, the chameleon killer, is believed to be responsible for additional murders beyond those 4. Denise Beaudin's body has never been found. Peder Reed's fate remains unknown, and investigators continue to look into whether Rasmussen is connected to other unsolved disappearances from the places he lived. What made his case unusual was the pattern. Most serial killers target strangers. Rasmussen killed the people closest to him: his girlfriends, his stepchildren, his own daughter. He hid them in steel drums in a state park and walked away. He changed his name and started over. He did it again and again. The Bear Brook murders were solved not by a confession, not by a witness, but by a single strand of DNA and the determination of a genealogist who refused to let 4 nameless victims be forgotten. Today, Marlies, Marie, Sarah, and Rae are no longer known only to God. They have their names back. And thanks to genetic genealogy, the man who killed them finally has a name too. I'm your narrator, and this has been Drawn Verdicts. If you want to see the full case files and source documents for this episode, they're linked in the description below. Next time, a case that took 74 years to solve, with a clue hidden in the lining of a dead man's suit. Subscribe for new documentaries like this. See you then.